Dead Space was a game originally released in 2008, and it got a complete remake in 2023. In this remake, the player takes control of Isaac Clarke, an engineer sent on a mission to repair the USG Ishimura. This remake has 47 achievements, and this is my journey to obtaining all of them. The game starts with a pre-recorded transmission from Nicole, Isaac's girlfriend, as she talks about how everything is falling apart at the Ishimura. Isaac stops the transmission as Daniels, the computer specialist of the Kellyan team, speaks with Isaac, talking about Nicole. Isaac explains the Ishimura isn't a job one turns down, but it's been hard with just video calls, foreshadowing that he might have said something bad in one of those calls. Chen, one of the Kellyan's corporals, tells the crew that they've arrived at Aegis 7, the planet the Ishimura was currently mining. Soon the ship is in view, and Hammond, the Kellyan's chief security officer, tells Chen to be careful when boarding the ship, as he doesn't want to damage the ship, which makes Daniels bring up that Hammond dug through everyone's personnel files, which Hammond assures her was standard procedure. Chen tries to contact the ship, but the Ishimura was radio silent, a complete communications blackout, odd for a planet cracker. Isaac believes the issue is a broken encoder, which him and Daniels would be able to fix within 2 days. When they try to board the ship, the gravity tethers malfunction, sending them careening down to the ship. Isaac quickly tells the pilots to aim for the emergency stabilizers, and Hammond says to drop the blast shields. They land rough, but they manage to make it to the flight deck mostly okay, aside from Johnston, another corporal, whose ankle is broken. Chen goes over the damage report for the Kellyan, stating it could be worse, but not by much. Hammond tells Johnston to stay with the Kellyan, and everyone else goes with him to find some help. As they walk to get signed in, Hammond found it odd how there wasn't anyone in flight control. Once they get signed in, the Ishimura's computer tells Isaac to get his stasis and kinesis modules from acting chief engineer Jacob Temple, but the computer states that he couldn't be found, and Hammond says he couldn't reach security. The crew enters the flight lounge, and it was barren. Hammond tells Isaac to get a damage report on the Ishimura, and Isaac goes into the security station. The damage report reveals that half the Ishimura was in the red. Daniels was able to get some of the ship's power redirected to them, but suddenly the quarantine system activated, which is one of the few systems that wasn't malfunctioning. Daniels tries to get the elevators to be powered, and while that's happening, the creature that set off the quarantine pops out of the vent and immediately kills Chen. Daniels is able to get the doors open, so Isaac runs to safety, with several of those creatures popping out from the vents. Isaac reaches the elevator safely and heads down to a storage room, where he obtains the first weapon of the game, the plasma cutter. Each weapon in this game has its own respective ammo and a unique alt-fire. The plasma cutter's alt-fire allows for the gun to switch from firing horizontally to vertically, useful as killing enemies in this game has a unique twist to them. As the writing on the wall hints at, in order to kill those creatures, you need to shoot off their limbs. Isaac is also able to melee with any weapon, including a foot stomp. This stomp is the easiest way to open these scattered loot containers, but they can also be opened via any damaging means. Isaac breaks the device locking this door, which begins the first combat encounter with the game's main enemy, the Necromorphs. This Necromorph in particular is the slasher variant, which is only able to melee you, so keeping a distance and firing at its limbs is optimal. If you're close enough, the slasher will grab you, forcing you to break free of its grip. A majority of enemies in this game have this mechanic, and failing it leads to an insta-kill. Here's a useful tip that I learned and utilized in later playthroughs. If you shoot the knees of the Necromorphs, the legs will eventually be shot off, forcing the Necromorph to crawl towards you, greatly reducing its mobility, useful when hordes of them are attacking you. Additionally, when enemies are killed, you can use the stomp to crush loot out of them. With the Necromorph down, Isaac heads towards tram controls, where he finds a health pack. These can be used to heal whenever, and have 3 types that each get progressively more healing. Once arriving at the controls, Daniels and Hammond speak to him over video call, confirming that Chen is in fact dead. Isaac also mentions that some of the Necromorphs he saw were wearing Ishimura uniforms, meaning these creatures used to be the crew. Hammond decides to be wise to go to the bridge, however Daniels states the tram system is offline, but it could be fixed. The tram would need to be replaced, and a new data board would need to be installed, but all of that is on Isaac's side of the quarantine. Not wanting to waste time, Isaac gets to it, first heading to the data board. Upon arriving to the maintenance bay, Isaac is attacked by some Necromorphs, and after dispatching them, takes an elevator up to power the door to the data board. Though I unpowered the elevator so I couldn't get back down and had to backtrack to power it back on and turn off the lights instead. But after that, Isaac heads down and I get my first achievement, Marksman, for dismembering 50 limbs. Isaac soon finds the data board, and within the same room, Isaac finds a power node, which can be used to upgrade his weapons and armor at a workbench. There's a lot of these scattered about the ship, mostly in areas of importance or side areas you can find, so I'm not going to describe every single one I find. Conveniently, there's also a bench in this room, so I upgraded my plasma cutter's damage. With the board in hand, Isaac replaces the old one, then heads to repair the tram, but is stopped by a malfunctioning door. Nearby, there was a stasis module, which Isaac grabs. Stasis allows Isaac to slow enemies or objects down. Unfortunately, you're not able to do this infinitely, as the stasis has 3 uses, though this can be upgraded. The stasis can be recharged at recharging stations or with stasis packs. After slowing the door, Isaac heads through, but gets interrupted by a strange hallucination, which thankfully ends quickly, allowing him to get to the tram repair room. Isaac begins the tram repair, but the autoloader was malfunctioning, so he had to manually engage the claws. The left claw was easy to engage, but the right one required Isaac to time the stasis blast to slow it down, allowing it to connect and allowing Isaac to replace the tram. On his way back to the control room, Isaac is ambushed by a new type of necromorph, the Spitter. Spitters are able to shoot acid balls at you, which if it lands deals some initial damage and a damage over time effect. Same with the slashers, just cut off their limbs to easily kill them. Isaac returns to the control room and calls the tram for Hammond and Daniels, who board and head to the bridge. Daniels tells Isaac the quarantine is lifted, and Hammond tells him to head back to the Kellyan and get it fixed. Isaac heads back to the flight lounge, where Hammond tells him there weren't any survivors in the bridge, and that Daniels is trying to get into the command computer. Making it back to the Kellyan, Isaac explains everything that was happening to Johnston and gets a damage reporting to Kellyan, but the necromorphs managed to find their way into the Kellyan Singularity Core and overloaded it. Johnston tried to fend off the necromorphs, but yeah, she isn't surviving that. After the blast, Isaac found himself faced with a new enemy, the Leaper. This necromorph is able to leap at you, also being able to crawl on the walls and ceilings. Same as the others, shoot the limbs off, though this one has a tail instead of legs. After dealing with a few Leapers, Hammond and Daniels call Isaac, where he catches them up on Johnston's death and the Kellyan's explosion. Needing another way out, Hammond asks about the command computer, which Daniels says is bricked, needing the captain's codes to be restored. Needing the captain, Daniels tracks his rig to the medical bay, his current status being deceased. Isaac was closer to the medical bay, but before he could depart, Hammond and Daniels are intercepted by a necromorph that resembled Chen. The call ends and Isaac begins to trek to medical. Along the way, Isaac picked up one too many items and couldn't fit anything else in his inventory. This game has a simple inventory system. It has a max amount of storage and items can be dropped on the fly if needed. Luckily, there was a store nearby, which gives Isaac a store to buy things like supplies and power nodes, and a separate storage to store unneeded items to be retrieved later. This store is also where Isaac is able to upgrade his suit, where each upgrade gives plus 5% increased resistance and more inventory space, so I upgraded the suit before continuing. I find another upgrade bench where the suit had more upgrades since the suit was now level 2. I also upgraded the ammo capacity and reload time of my plasma cutter. Isaac takes a lift down to the medical cargo depot where I get the next achievement, Welcome Aboard, for completing Chapter 1. The way to medical was blocked by some storage crates, but luckily there was a kinesis module nearby. Kinesis lets you move any items marked with the magnet symbol, but also any physics object. Kinesis is also a valuable tool in combat, as scattered about the map are metal poles and rods that can one-shot most necromorphs, also known as penny an enemy. The fans on the vents can also be used as an effective slicing tool with kinesis, and these can be obtained by either having an enemy break through a vent or by breaking it yourself. There's also explosive barrels and stasis barrels that can be thrown with kinesis to activate, but they can also be activated if hit. On top of everything, most necromorphs have spikes that can be kinesis off and thrown at other enemies for extra damage. Using his new kinesis module, Isaac clears a way to the medical tram station, where he gets the next weapon, the pulse rifle. The pulse rifle is an automatic weapon that does low damage, and its all-fire allows Isaac to shoot out an explosive mine, at the cost of 25 ammo. Isaac lifts the tram lockdown in medical, which would allow him to travel between the different areas of the Ishimura when he unlocks more. Isaac heads into medical, having to move some boxes out of the way, but upon entering he gets a call from Hammond where he tells Isaac that him and Daniels got separated. Isaac tells Hammond that the morgue has been barricaded, but it was in a hurry and he could easily destroy it with a few items found in medical. Hammond points out that the one that attacked him strongly resembled Chen, so the morgue's barricade could be to keep something in. Going down to the research wing, Isaac finds himself quarantined, so he had to kill every necromorph to lift the lockdown. Once they were all dealt with, Isaac located Nicole's office, but she wasn't there. He listens to an audio log from her, and at the end tries to track her rig location, but the computer couldn't find her, so offered to manually track her rig, which told Isaac to go to the emergency room in medical. Isaac enters the main lab changing room, where he grabs schematics for a stasis pack. Schematics can be brought to stores to make the item available to purchase. Heading forward into the Biological Prosthetic Center, Isaac is faced with another new enemy, the Lurker. Lurkers are able to climb on walls and ceilings like the Leapers, but they have a ranged attack, so they try to stay far away from you. When attacking at a distance, they'll sprout 3 tendrils that each fire an acid glob that deals damage over time. The limbs to take down the Lurkers easily are these tendrils, as shooting them off will kill them. With the Lurkers down, Isaac finds himself a shock pad, which with the hydrazine tank could blow open the way to the morgue. Isaac disconnects the power and grabs the shock pad before heading back to the security station. Isaac goes through the other available door, which leads him to the imaging diagnostic wing. Using kinesis, he moves this tube which lets him pass forward, but is blocked by an unpowered elevator. Kinesis is also able to move around loose power cells, which when gently moved into a socket, brings power to connected wires. If the wire is connected to a circuit breaker, you can move around the power to any available outlet so long as you have enough power. Power cells can be removed from the socket with kinesis so long as it's not powering a circuit breaker or not powering anything through the breaker. Before going up the powered elevator, Isaac enters a nearby room which had an upgrade bench, and I upgrade the plasma cutter's damage and the suit's max HP. Heading up the elevator, Isaac uses kinesis to move the tube again, this time to create a platform to get to the other side. Going through the hallway, he heads through zero-G therapy. On the way, he finds himself in the vacuum of space. This gives Isaac an air meter, and once it runs out, he dies. Thankfully, the air meter can be replenished either through air tanks or through air refill stations, similar to stasis. Exiting the vacuum, Isaac enters zero-G therapy, and this introduces another mechanic, zero gravity. Once you take off, you're basically able to free roam around in any direction. You can also still sprint and attack while in zero gravity. If you happen to get into a dizzying orientation, you can reset yourself to the original rotation. There's only two threats you'll mainly encounter during zero gravity, and those are the leapers and lurkers. When you've done everything you need to in zero gravity, you can land back down at any flat surface. At the other side, Isaac enters zero-G maintenance and grabs the hydrazine tank and begins to head back to the security station. The previous way back was blocked, so Isaac used the zero-G EV ability to get to the second floor, exiting out near the coolant pipes. As he heads down an elevator shaft, Hammond tells him that he trapped the Chen-looking necromorph in an escape pod. While in the coolant pipe tunnel, Isaac gets schematics for pulse rounds. Back at the security station, Isaac sets up the tank and shock pad and steps into a booth, blowing up a passage into the emergency room. Entering, Hammond reminds Isaac to get to the morgue, and Isaac finds his first weapon upgrade, one for the plasma cutter. These can be taken back to upgrade benches for a free power node and to unlock a new upgrade path for weapons, unlocking a special that gives a unique bonus to the weapon. Inside the emergency room, Isaac watches a hologram of Nicole, where she talks about how medical is at capacity and that they need help. He watches the hologram leave and enter an area that was blocked. By powering up a circuit breaker and moving the door with kinesis, Isaac enters the room and finds an audio log, which points him in the direction of engineering, as the log stated she was going to perform an autopsy there. Isaac removes that power cell and powers the ER hallway door with it. Going through the hallway, Isaac enters the ICU and heads to the morgue hallway, which unfortunately gets a hole blown into it, briefly making the hallway enter the vacuum of space before the automatic blast doors activate to seal the room. This popped the power cell powering the elevator, so Isaac had to reinstall it to travel down to the morgue. Finally there, Isaac enters the autopsy room and grabs the captain's rig, when a strange creature latches onto him and transforms the captain into a necromorph. After dealing with the captain, Isaac heads out and deals with the creature, a new enemy type called an infector. Infectors are able to make the unturned dead crew into new necromorphs. They don't have really large obvious limbs to shoot, so I typically go for the wings, which seems to do the trick. Once the morgue was clear of enemies, Isaac grabs the captain's rig and Hammond calls him. He transmits the captain's codes to Hammond and confirms their suspicion that the necromorph that attacked him and Daniels was once Chen. With the captain's codes, Hammond upgrades Isaac's security clearance, which allows you to access higher level doors and loot containers. As Isaac heads down an elevator, something shakes the ship, causing Hammond to call Isaac again. Hammond informs Isaac that the engines are completely offline, meaning Isaac would have to go to engineering to fix them. However, the engineering tram station was also offline, but luckily Hammond tells Isaac there's a shortcut to engineering back at the flight deck. When arriving there, I get the next achievement, Lab Rat, for completing Chapter 2.
Any news on the engines?
Yeah, but it makes no sense.
Hammond lets Isaac know about a broken cargo lift that would take him to engineering, then opens the hangar doors and turns off the gravity, allowing Isaac to freely roam the flight deck. Isaac heads down the shaft and enters engineering, going over to the main console to assess what needs to be fixed. Isaac just needed to fix the centrifuge, have the fuel running into the engines again, and then do a full restart to get the engines working again. Isaac heads down to the centrifuge, and along the way, I upgrade my plasma cutter's capacity, reload speed, and damage. Continuing to the centrifuge, Isaac enters a decontamination room and fends off a couple of necromorphs before being allowed to continue, where I grab the schematic for a medium health pack. Arriving at the centrifuge, Isaac uses the zero gravity to attach the generated modules, having to stasis them beforehand. With both modules attached, Isaac restarts the centrifuge, which enables the gravity and opens the room to the vacuum of space. Isaac needs to get to the other side to leave, but had to take a detour, going down an elevator and having to weave in and out of the incoming centrifuge, which got him killed. Trying again, Isaac weaves in and out of the centrifuge and makes it to the other side. On his way back to the control room, Isaac is grabbed by a tentacle, so shoots at its glowing sac to cut off the part that was grabbing him. After that weird encounter, Isaac makes it back to the control room and heads to the store, where I buy the heat accumulator upgrade for the plasma cutter, as the shop has an upgrade for every weapon that becomes available when you get the weapon after Chapter 2. Now Isaac had to get the fuel running again, so heads into the machine shop, where he finds the next weapon, the Ripper. The Ripper is the closest thing to a normal melee weapon this game gets. The Ripper shoots out a saw that hovers in front of you, allowing you to tear apart necromorphs, even staggering them back occasionally. The Ripper's all-fire allows for the blade to be shot, making it ricochet off walls and redirect to an enemy, even piercing through them. Isaac then enters the refueling control stations and uses kinesis to refuel the north engines. He takes a tram to the south station, but dies due to the spitter's acids. Going there again, Isaac makes it safely across and grabs the fuel station keycard. He then gets a call from Daniels, who is safely barricaded in the computer core, and states she'll try to assist Isaac as much as she can. Using the keycard, Isaac enters a room with a circuit breaker, which lets him switch power to the south fueling station. After quickly refueling the south station, Isaac heads back to the machine shop, where I use the upgrade bench to upgrade my plasma cutter's capacity and rate of fire. Isaac heads into the calibration room, where a hologram of Nicole was performing the previously mentioned autopsy. During the autopsy, she mentions how these creatures are all connected to a marker that was found on Aegis 7. Dr. Kyne studied this marker, but has since vanished, though could be in the mining deck with other survivors, giving Isaac another location to check in the future. Back at the control room, Daniels informs Isaac she opened the way to the engine chamber. Before going, Isaac overrides the engineering tram station's lockdown. As Isaac progresses, Daniels talks about how she found some interesting files mentioning an alien artifact that was dug up on Aegis 7, the marker, that was currently held up in the cargo bay. Isaac uses kinesis to slow down a fan to access a circuit to open a door, also powering off the fans. In the next room, Isaac was stopped by some growth on the walls, which could be destroyed by shooting at the glowing cluster. Proceeding past the growth, Isaac finds the next weapon, the flamethrower. Similar to the pulse rifle, this is a constant fire weapon that shoots a short beam of fire in front of you, allowing you to set hordes of enemies on fire, which deals damage over time and peels away at Necromorph's armor. The alt fire consumes 25 ammo and throws a canister which creates a wall of fire where it lands. The wall lasts for a while and deals considerable damage to enemies who walk into it, as well as setting them on fire. Isaac walks down this flesh hallway and begins to head to the engines. I find an upgrade station and buy the first special for the plasma cutter, which makes its shots deal a damage over time effect. As Isaac travels, a new enemy is introduced, the Swarmers. These enemies aren't hard to kill, but they always come in a horde. They're easiest to kill with a flamethrower, especially if you use the alt fire. If you don't kill them, they latch onto you and deal low damage, as well as preventing you from using any action until you get them off, which does kill them. In the room where the Swarmers came from, Isaac gets the schematics for Ripper Blades. When Isaac reaches the bottom, another enemy is introduced. The Pregnants? Why are they called that? Oh, hello! So, as the name implies, the Pregnants have a glowing belly and, if it's shot at enough, can burst out a horde of Swarmers. If you do not want the Pregnants to give birth, shoot at their limbs to kill them quickly. Isaac slows down a door and finally heads into the engine room. He powers up the engines and fends off against a horde of enemies while the engines do some pre-ignition checks. With the enemies cleared out, the engines were ready to run. After firing on the engines, Isaac also grabs the schematics for the flamethrower's fuel. With the engines up and running again, Hammond calls Isaac to inform him of his success and states the autopilot is flying them through the planet crack debris, which wouldn't be a problem if the asteroid defense system wasn't offline. Hammond tells Isaac to head to the bridge so they could work together. Immediately after the call, Isaac gets a strange transmission from Nicole that quickly ends with only a single message from her. At the engineering tram station, I get the next achievement, all systems go, for completing Chapter 3.
I can hold this position for a while, if no more asteroids come through the roof.
Isaac takes the tram to the bridge, and Hammond starts another call, where he states he will need his help as he didn't want to lose the Ishimura. Daniels interrogates Hammond, asking if he was actually more worried about losing the marker, as CEC, the company that owns the Ishimura, wouldn't just excavate a random alien planet, but they would one with alien technology. Hammond goes to defend himself before Isaac breaks the catfight, saying they need to focus before the Ishimura is destroyed by the planet's debris. Hammond and Daniels agree to stop fighting, but Daniels is going to do more snooping. On his way to the bridge's atrium, Isaac sees a glimpse of an upcoming Necromorph, a rather large one, though it's sealed away for now. Inside the atrium, an asteroid bursts through, briefly putting Isaac in the vacuum of space before some blast doors seal the hole the asteroid made. Isaac heads down and meets Hammond, who is in front of his escape pod that housed the Necromorph turned Chen. Hammond decides it's the best idea to eject the escape pod. I mean, Isaac could just completely immobilize it and easily kill it like he's done with other Necromorphs, but no, let's send this specific one out to the vast emptiness of space to be potentially found by someone else. After launching Chen, they meet in the captain's nest, where Hammond goes over what he knows. The power to the ADS was disconnected, so Isaac suggests rerouting power from systems that aren't doing much. Hammond agrees to this plan, then tries to explain that he's here just for a repair mission, not whatever Daniels is trying to convict him of. Isaac shuts that down, saying he doesn't know either of them well enough to judge, but he does know that CZ had to know about the marker. Hammond decides he'll talk about it later, and tells Isaac to get to the circuit breakers, which he could do by turning the atrium's elevators back on from security, an area he could access after Hammond upgrades his clearance with the CEC executive keycard he found. Isaac heads back up, and as he approaches the door to security, the new Necromorph makes its appearance, the Brute. Brutes are large and tanky, having a lot of armor on their front and constantly charging at you. While they are heavily armored on their front, their back has almost no armor, showing off their weak points, easily accessed by using stasis on them and just running behind them. Honestly, for as big and scary as they are, so long as you stasis them, there isn't much they can do to you. Isaac takes down the Brute, and I get the next achievement, Brute Force. In the security room, Isaac finds a recording about Dr. Kyne, where it's revealed he was the one who killed the captain, though it wasn't on purpose as the captain charged at him when Kyne was trying to help. Security decided to take him away, but he ran. I use the nearby upgrade bench to upgrade the plasma cutter's damage, and I get its second special, which gives it more ammo capacity. Isaac reactivates the elevators and heads down to floor 2 in the atrium. Here he heads to mining administrations, where Daniels informs him that there are electrical hazards ahead. Inside, Isaac sees these hazards, which will shock you if you run into it, but also shocks enemies. At the back of mining administrations, Isaac switches the power over to the ADS cannons, then heads back to the elevator, taking a slight detour to enter the records office, where he finds the next weapon, the contact beam. The contact beam is another continuous fire weapon. The laser beam it fires deals good damage constantly while the beam is on an enemy. However, its all fire creates a strong blast of damage after a short charge up, only consuming 3 ammunition. Going down to floor 3, Isaac enters a break room where he sees footage of the marker. In the room outside, Isaac shoots a door lock through some broken glass, which lets him access electrical system storage, where he finds an upgrade for the pulse rifle. Isaac then enters electrical systems, where he faces another brute. Once it's down, Isaac slows down the sparking wire and transfers the energy to the ADS. Isaac heads back to the atrium and goes to the other elevator, which takes him to water purification. The last electrical box to reroute wasn't far, and the ADS finally had its power back, but Hammond informs Isaac that the auto-targeting was shot. Isaac says he could manually fire the cannons until it had enough data to recalibrate the auto-targeting system, and Hammond reluctantly agrees, so opens the exterior access. During the conversation, Isaac grabs schematics for the next suit upgrade. Going outside the ship, Isaac heads over to one of the cannons and syncs it to his tools, allowing him to aim at asteroids and manually fire the cannon, which after a few times repeating this recalibrates one of the cannon's auto-targeting. After doing this 2 more times with 2 different cannons, the system completely restarts, giving all the cannons the new data. Before heading back, Isaac grabs this rig, which belonged to White, the acting captain after the previous one died. Isaac heads back inside, and on his way to the atrium, I get the next achievement, Cannon Fodder, for completing Chapter 4. Isaac then gets a call from Daniels informing him about an interesting broadcast from Medical, where Nicole was telling survivors to head over there as it was a sanctuary, though something seemed off, especially with how glitchy the transmission was. Isaac decides to head back to Medical, and Hammond figures he should try sneaking onto the crew deck, which is met with suspicion from Daniels. As Isaac makes his way back, another enemy makes its appearance, the Creepers, or at least that's what they're called in the later games, so I'm going to call these guys the Remainders. These are basically just a more annoying version of the Swarmers, and can be easily killed in the same way via the flamethrower. On the way to the tram, I stop by a shop and upgrade Isaac's suit to level 3. At the tram, Isaac travels to Medical, and Daniels, whose audio is distorted, tells him the signal was being broadcasted from chemical storage. Medical looks very different, now with a more cult-like vibe. Back at the security station, the door locks behind Isaac, then a new person talks over the intercom. He states that Isaac is safe as he's a doctor, but as Isaac presses to let him pass to Nicole, the doctor gets agitated, saying that he'll deal with him shortly. The way to chemical storage opens back through the imaging wing. Back at the imaging area, the place now has that growth that was in engineering, as well as another new enemy, the Guardian. Guardians are fixated on walls, so can't move, but in order to make up for their lack of movement, they're able to summon pods that can spit acid at you. The pods are killed in the same way lurkers are, just shoot off the tendril. The only way to kill Guardians is to wait until they open up, revealing several tendrils that all need to be cut off before the tendrils re-enter their body. Do be careful, as getting too close to the Guardians can make them activate an insta-kill. After the Guardian is killed, Isaac heads up to the 2nd floor and goes through zero-G therapy, entering a previously inaccessible room which had schematics for line racks. This is the ammo type for the next weapon, which you get later in this chapter, though I guess you could go and get it during chapter 4 through backtracking. Anywho, Isaac heads down to the chemical lab. He unlocks the door to the imaging wing before entering the lab, which has the broadcast of Nicole, but it was unfortunately just a hologram. Once Isaac stops the hologram, he gets distracted by an obvious hologram of Nicole, which allows the same doctor from before to stasis him. The doctor reveals himself to be Chalice Mercer, a colleague of Nicole. He starts spouting about unitology, a religion in this world that was developed after the marker was discovered on Earth, asking Isaac if he's the reason convergence won't begin. He then moves on to talk about necromorphs, mentioning dismemberment as their cause of death, as he stands next to an enhanced-looking necromorph. He talks about convergence again, saying that Isaac's death could tip the balance, before leaving and unleashing the new necromorph, the Hunter. The Hunter, for all intents and purposes, is just a slasher necromorph, though it has the unique ability to regenerate any of its limbs if enough are cut off, making it functionally immortal. As Isaac fights the Hunter, Daniels is able to get back in contact with Isaac, with him urging her to unlock the door to the chemical lab. When she does, Isaac zooms back to security station. He talks to Daniels about Mercer, which she says he's completely locked down Medical aside from one office. She could unlock the doors to there, but Isaac would have to manually lift the lockdown. Before heading forward, I buy the Ricochet Tracer upgrade for the Ripper from the store. Isaac heads to the clinic, having to reinstall the power cell to open the way to the ER. Within the ER hallway, Isaac enters the security clearance 2-door, which had the weapon that schematic was for, the line gun. The line gun is a more powerful version of the plasma cutter, though it can only fire horizontally. The beam the gun fires is able to pierce through enemies, making it good for hordes. The alt-fire places down a line trap which electrifies anything within the beam, including Isaac. Unfortunately, I died to the nearby Guardians, so before going back, I went to the upgrade station in the imaging wing to upgrade my Reaper's damage, capacity, and reloading time. This time, Isaac makes it past the Guardian and enters the ICU, which had Mercer's office inside. Isaac listed lockdown and had to wait for the system to reboot. As this happens, this guy wakes up and tells Isaac to save hydroponics as the air was being poisoned, but someone was making an enzyme to help and just needed liquid nitrogen to complete it. Daniels confirms the drop in air quality and Isaac makes a plan to head to cryogenics, which Daniels helps make a path to. While trying to head back, Mercer pumps in some poisonous gas, but thankfully there are vent controls at the security station. Isaac vents the deck, which removes the toxic gas, and Daniels says that the gas was pumped from hydroponics, making saving that deck a priority. Daniels tells Isaac there's a way to cryogenics through the chemical lab. Once there, Isaac heads into cryogenics and grabs the liquid nitrogen. Mercer reveals himself again, where he hints at the fact that Isaac may have said something rude to Nicole, a callback to what Isaac said to Daniels at the start of the game. Mercer begins to speak about unitology again, even mentioning bringing the Nakamors to Earth, which would spell doom for the entire planet. Once he leaves, he stakes the hunter on Isaac again. Having to face off against the hunter, Isaac thinks of a plan to get rid of it, so decides to use the cryogenics freezing mechanism to freeze the hunter. After using stasis to slow it down, Isaac quickly freezes the hunter, freeing him of it for the time being. Daniels calls Isaac, which gets me another achievement, Storyteller, for collecting 75 logs. And the call, Daniels tells Isaac that she hasn't been able to reach Hammond since he entered the crew deck, then says the air quality is dropping fast, so Isaac needed to go to hydroponics now. After the call, I get the next achievement, True Believer, for completing Chapter 5.
This is Dr. Elizabeth Cross. To all survivors, turn back.
Inside the cryogenic freezer, Isaac finds a tissue sample from the hunter, and could use a DNA scanner to figure out what Mercer was doing. There's a DNA scanner back at the research wing, so Isaac heads there. As he does this, Daniels tells him a way to hydroponics via a door from a tram repair station Isaac was at earlier. I went back to the upgrade bench in imaging and upgraded the suit's max air and max stasis energy, which gives one more use before needing to be recharged. At the research wing, Isaac scans the DNA. The scanner tells Isaac the DNA belonged to Brant Harris, one of Mercer's patients. The DNA had several abnormalities, yeah, no shit, and the computer gives Isaac a way to track Harris's rig. Isaac authorizes the tracking, and it leads him to the ICU. On the way to the ICU, I get an achievement, Live with the Hot Ones, for killing 30 enemies with the flamethrower. At the ICU, Isaac watches a video playback of a chat between Mercer and Harris. Mercer wanted him to do something in ore storage, then experimented on him, making him begin to see things involving the marker. Once the recording was over, Isaac needed to head to ore storage on the mining deck, but since it's still inaccessible, Isaac begins to head to hydroponics. I instead backtracked to engineering and opened a previously inaccessible room, which had the schematics for the oxygen tank. I then grabbed a health upgrade for the suit before taking a tram ride back to the flight deck. Isaac then goes back to the repair room, and the access door to hydroponics was on the other side. Daniels calls Isaac to tell him there's a huge mass in food storage, one that was likely the cause of the poisonous gas. Isaac lifts the hydroponics tram lockdown before taking an elevator up, where a looping hologram of Elizabeth Cross tells him to turn back, as the monster within food storage already killed the rest of her team. Entering the central hub, there was a workstation left open, the one that was making the enzyme. After delivering the liquid nitrogen to it, it formulated the enzyme, so Isaac started going to food storage before being cut off and called by someone. The scientist tells Isaac that the Leviathan, the huge mass in food storage, would kill him if he went there. Isaac realizes that this is Elizabeth Cross, and asks if the Leviathan is what's causing the air quality to drop. Elizabeth confirms this and restates how it's destroyed her team. She talks about her enzyme, which Isaac tells her is complete and that he has it. She then tells him that they need to inject it into the Leviathan, and despite not being able to go into food storage, there was another way. The Leviathan altered her team, creating Weezers that breathed out the Leviathan's toxins. Isaac could use this, injecting them with the enzyme which would pump the enzyme into the Leviathan. Once he gets all of them, they'd be able to vent the Leviathan into space. Isaac then heads into Flow Control, which within the Flow Supervisor's office had an upgrade for the Ripper. Isaac heads up a lift and enters the Westgrove chamber, where, after a bit of exploring, Isaac finds the final weapon, the Force Gun, which gets me another achievement, Full Arsenal. The Force Gun is, in my opinion, the most useful weapon in this game. Its primary fires a wave of energy that not only pushes enemies back, but also peels their armor, making them significantly easier to kill. Its alt-fire creates a gravity well, which sucks in nearby physics objects and enemies, practically immobilizing them for the duration. In a different room on the same floor lied the first Weezer, which Isaac injects with the enzyme. With one down, Isaac heads up to the top floor, where he talks with Elizabeth. She asks who Isaac is, and after he tells her his name and that he's an engineer, she asks if he's seen Jacob Temple. He hasn't, but he mentions he's looking for someone as well, that being Nicole. Elizabeth brings up how Nicole helps people leave unitology, and Isaac mentions that's how they met, as she helped his mom leave it. At the top floor, Isaac enters Liz's office and ejects another Weezer, then goes down to the second floor and switches power from the ambient jungle noise to power both doors, before heading to the refrigeration tower. This is where the next enemy is introduced, the Exploder. Exploders don't do much, but they do have an exploding cluster attached to one of their limbs, which they will self-detonate if they get close enough to you. You can either shoot the cluster, which will force explode it, instantly killing the Exploder and potentially killing surrounding enemies, or cut off the cluster from their body to be used with kinesis like the explosive barrels, though you will still have to kill the Exploder. While fighting the several exploders this tunnel has, I get the next achievement, a cut above, for killing 30 enemies with the Ripper. Entering the refrigeration tower, Isaac uses the 0G to head upwards, moving blockades with kinesis until he reaches the top, where he was able to inject another Weezer. Back at the West Grow chamber, Isaac heads into hydroponics control, where he gets another glitchy call from Nicole asking him where he was and to help her. There's another Weezer that he injects before entering the East Grow chamber. Daniels calls Isaac to tell him about something important, but cuts herself off when she notices her brother a few doors down from Isaac. She decides to end the call, telling Isaac to just continue. Isaac brings a few clusters, which gives him access to a lift, but instead of taking it, he goes down to the air filtration hall. Once he opens the door to the air filtration tower, he's grabbed by another tentacle, so shoots it off of him. Once he enters the tower, Daniels calls him again, just kind of talking to herself, but she does mention that her brother has been dead, then goes to talk about what the marker could do in the wrong hands. Daniels tries to start back the argument she had with Hammond earlier about CEC wanting the marker, but Isaac sets it down again, wanting to just focus on getting the air quality back up. This tower is the same as the previous one. Use 0G to head up, stasis obstacles in the way, but at the top led Isaac to the air filtration tube annex. After heading down, he shoots open the door locks and goes through the tubes when it won't burn him alive. Once he's at the other side, he takes care of some more necromorphs, which gets me another achievement, Surgeon, for dismembering 500 necromorph limbs. Isaac heads up and enters the annex storage, which had another Weezer to inject. Back at the tube annex, Isaac takes a path back to the East Grow chamber, and after a short elevator ride, he was back with another Weezer to inject. And the shop near the East Grow chamber, I bought the Super Symmetry Tether upgrade for the contact beam. On the bottom floor of the East chamber, Isaac faces off against another brute, which didn't stand much a chance at this point. Looking around, Isaac finds and ejects another Weezer. He soon finds a power cell, which powered a breaker that could disable gravity, but he needed a keycard first. He finds his keycard in another room in the Grow chamber, and the same room had an upgrade bench where I upgrade the contact beam's capacity, alt fire damage, and primary damage, as well as the Ripper's capacity and second special, which gives the alt fire's blades an additional ricochet. With the keycard in hand, Isaac disables the gravity and heads to the top of the Grow chamber, where he injects the final Weezer. Liz calls Isaac, happy that her crew was now at peace, and told Isaac to head back to storage to vent the Leviathan. Now at food storage, Isaac releases the airlock, but something goes wrong. The Leviathan was still clinging on. Elizabeth wanted to get and use more of her enzyme on it, but Isaac knew they were out of time, so just decides to go in there and shoot it off. Isaac enters food storage, and lo, the first boss of this game, the Leviathan. In its first phase, it's able to send out its tentacles to attack you, but you just have to move out of its way to dodge. To kill it, attack the glowing clusters the tentacles have a lot stretched, and eventually the tentacles will be destroyed, which changes the previous attack to allowing the tentacles to occasionally swap places with an empty slot. Once all 3 tentacles are down, the Leviathan is in its next phase. Here its mouth opens up, where the cluster you need to attack lies. While the mouth is open, it's able to spit out exploding clusters, which can be redirected with kinesis back at it. After enough health is depleted, the Leviathan will enter its final phase, which is just a combination of the previous 2 phases attacks with the addition of the whole room being filled with the gas, making the boss fight on a time limit. You can also use any of the damaging methods to hurt it, either the tentacles or its mouth cluster. With a final hit with its own bomb cluster, the Leviathan is defeated, and it gets vented into space. I get the next achievement, Exterminator, for killing the Leviathan. Liz calls Isaac and says that they'll talk once he's back inside. Once he is, she says that the air is improving, then talks about her boyfriend Jacob, and how he was with the other survivors on the mining deck, and that they built an SOS beacon, but she hadn't heard from him in a while. However, she needed to stay until the air was fully safe to breathe. Daniels then calls Isaac as she was listening in on the previous conversation, and gives him a shortcut to the mining deck, which he could access from the hydroponics central hub. This gives me another achievement, Greenhouse Effect, for completing Chapter 6.
Anomaly destroyed.
After a short elevator ride, Isaac was at the mining tram station and lifts its lockdown. He enters mining operations and gets a call from Daniels, who says that the systems were running haywire, and she was working on the elevators for the mining deck. She asks if Isaac knows where the beacon would be, and he says he checked the mining control room as it had launch tubes that could send the beacon out. After this, Hammond joins the call, so he was at least still alive. He was in the vents in the crew deck and says the entire deck was overrun by unitologists. Unfortunately, his signal was lost, so Daniels urges Isaac to find the beacon. Isaac heads into the mining deck's main elevator, where Daniels tells him that most of the subdecks were locked down, so Isaac could only go to the main mining deck. As he goes down, eventually the elevator stops due to a power malfunction, and he fends off against some necromorphs before the elevator begins running. He exits at Deck C and goes down its hallway, where some of the line cutter's traps are laid out. He blocks the traps with some miscellaneous crates and finds the ore storage Mercer sent Harris to. After moving some crates, he retrieves a security audio log that details the events of Harris's job at ore storage. He was stealing osmium from Mercer, talks about how badly he was treated when mining on Aegis 7, then kills the person trying to stop him from taking the osmium via the shop suit upgrader. Nicole made a report on this incident that was filed to the bridge, so Isaac could head back there to continue his investigation. Isaac then entered the extraction area and powered up a lift to the control room. Taking the lift up, Isaac found the launch tubes, but needed authorization from the mining deck supervisor to launch. Daniels calls Isaac to let him know she was getting somewhere with the lockdowns on the other subdecks and asks Isaac if he had the beacon yet. He tells her he didn't and adds that the launch tubes were sealed, needing an admin's rig to open them. Daniels tells Isaac that the supervisor is on the processing subject, and she had activity from Jacob Temple's rig on the maintenance subject, so the beacon could be there. Daniels hopes Isaac can get through the malfunctions, but Isaac corrects her, saying that these are traps by the miners. After this, she opens the way to the other subdecks. Isaac heads back to the main elevator and heads up to the processing deck. After entering the subdeck, Isaac clears a path down a hallway and listens to a pre-recorded hologram from Jacob, who made this one for Elizabeth. He says he's going to lock up the beacon to go off deck to help another survivor, Mercer. Oh, buddy, you're screwed. Isaac goes down the hallway and enters the mineral processing area, then heads into the main processing room. Daniels calls him and says the rig is in the processing control room, but the failsafe was tripped and the door wouldn't open until gravity was restored in the processing room. However, gravity couldn't be restored until all the miscellaneous debris was cleared. After using kinesis to throw the rocks into the processing laser, Isaac is able to restore gravity, but gets ambushed by some necromorphs. During the battle, I get the next achievement, Raise the Stakes, for pinning an enemy to a wall. After this, he heads into the control room and grabs Dallas's rig, which gets him security clearance level 3. Daniels calls Isaac to see if he had the rig, which he did, so he began to head to get the SOS beacon, and on his way back to the elevator, he destroys a door lock, which let him access a room with the contact energy schematics. Isaac reaches the elevator and heads down to maintenance, where Hammond calls him and Daniels, still inside the vents. He tells the two that the unitologists were bringing something in, then showed them what it was, the marker. Both Isaac and Daniels get stunned by this for a second before continuing on as normal. Unfortunately, Daniels lost Hammond's signal again, so it was back to Isaac finding the beacon. Entering the maintenance deck, Isaac finds an offshoot where after flipping power around, he finds a few audio logs, one where it's a late night talk between him and Nicole, and it's revealed he's the one that pushed her to do the job on the Ishimura, and the second one was a talk between Nicole and Kyne, with her asking about the marker and how to stop the outbreak. He said Mercer might know, but stopped himself after mentioning Mercer's room in the crew deck, but Nicole managed to convince him to tell her how to get in after playing the previous audio log to him, comparing Nicole and Isaac's love to Kyne's and Amelia's, who was Kyne's love before she died. Before Nicole leaves, Kyne warns her about Mercer. Isaac couldn't continue his search for Nicole as he doesn't have access to the crew deck yet, so he continues the search for the beacon. Isaac heads into the equipment maintenance bay and takes a tram to the other side, where he finally reunites with Nicole. He explains about the SOS beacon, and she says that they locked it up in the workshop but her clearance could get him in. In the adjoining room, Nicole began to unlock the workshop. Isaac wanted to talk, but she said to focus on getting the beacon, there would be time to talk later. As she opens the way, necromorphs try to kill them, so Isaac kills them for Nicole, and she eventually opens the way. Isaac wanted to go to her, but she urges him to just get the SOS beacon and she'll catch up with him via the maintenance ducts. Before Isaac leaves, Nicole says that he can put things back the way they were, and that would make them whole again. Inside the workshop, Isaac finds the schematics for the next suit upgrade and the SOS beacon. As he makes his way back, Daniels calls him, saying she lost his signal similar to Hammond. Isaac said he was good and that he has the beacon thanks to Nicole's help, which Daniels sounded confused at the mention of. Isaac said he was heading back to the mining control room to launch the beacon. Once the lift reached the mining subject, the power malfunctioned again, leading Isaac to fight against more necromorphs. Once the power was restored, Isaac entered the extraction area, where he upgraded the suit to the next level. Isaac went back to the control room and tried to launch the tubes again, but they were obstructed as the miners booby-trapped the tubes. Daniels calls trying to figure out what happened, and once she was caught up, couldn't think of what to do next. Isaac thinks he could just use the asteroid that was being processed via attaching the beacon to it and launching it into space. So Isaac begins to head there. Once in the extraction room, he swaps the power cell to power and take the lift down to the mining bay. Once here, Isaac uses his stasis module to slow down the gravity tethers, then destroys one of the capsules inside, stopping the tether from working. He does this 3 more times, once more inside and twice on the exterior of the ship, before planting the beacon on the asteroid and heading back to the control room. The hallway from the mining bay to the extraction room now had fire exhaust, so Isaac needed a time going between the blasts. Back at the extraction room, Isaac puts the power cell back and heads to the control room again, launching the asteroid and the beacon with it. Daniels tells him the beacon worked and that she was going to align the receiver. This would take a bit, so Isaac begins to head back to the tram station, but is unfortunately stopped by a quarantine, locking him in the control room. But doubly unfortunate, the necromorph the system is detecting is the functionally immortal Hunter. Basically being trapped, Isaac tells Daniels to override the manual door release. She manages this, and Isaac uses kinesis to hit the release, before running back to the main elevator to get to the tram. On the elevator ride up, Daniels talks to Isaac saying that the Hunter is gone for now, and says that she's been getting those visions of her brother again. She was also thankful about the beacon, but saw something troubling. Remember how the Hellion team originally came here to repair the full communications blackout? Yeah, well, they never fixed it, it's still broken. This means they cannot receive any communication from other ships investigating the SOS beacon, but in some good news, the encoder wasn't broken, so it probably wouldn't take 24 hours or more to repair. Daniels tells Isaac to head back to the bridge as she'll open a way to comms from there. Back at the tram station, I get another achievement, SOS, for completing Chapter 7.
Entering zero gravity.
Isaac takes the tram over to the bridge, and once he departs, Daniels informs Isaac and Hammond that someone heard their SOS beacon as a ship, the USM Valor, just arrived. Isaac found this odd as the Valor was a military ship, but Daniels decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth and told Isaac to get to comms to fix it so they could get some answers. Isaac re-enters the main atrium where another quarantine happens. This time he just fends off against a bunch of exploders. Once all the necromorphs were killed, the quarantine lifts, and Isaac finds the report Nicole filed on the ore storage incident. In this hologram playback, she was talking to the captain, who mentioned how Harris was originally her patient, but she says he was doing better until Mercer took over. The captain, who is a unitologist, didn't take kindly to Nicole's methods of getting people to leave the church. Nicole tries to warn the captain about Mercer's treatments, even questioning why he keeps taking Harris to hydroponics. She says medical is a sanctuary and not Mercer's personal lab, but the captain wasn't having it, telling her to leave. The hologram mentioned hydroponics, so that was Isaac's next destination in his investigation. Isaac takes a tram back to hydroponics and heads to hydroponics control, which now had a new unlocked door to nutrition systems. After traversing the poisonous gas, Isaac enters the diagnostics lab, where Isaac finds an audio log from Mercer, which was him talking to an almost fully transformed Harris. Once the log ended, I got an achievement, Final Regeneration, for completing the side quest Premeditated Malpractice. And the room also contained an upgrade for Isaac's stasis, the prototype stasis module. This upgrade completely immobilizes enemies, and also burns away their armor. Back at the bridge's atrium, Isaac heads down to the captain's nest, where he finds a device that could make him a master override key if he collects all the admin rigs, which he already had a few of. I decided to go ahead and grab the rigs I could get, so began backtracking. I found Chief Engineer Rousseau's rig on the top floor of the big room leading to the engines and engineering through a security clearance 3-door. I next found Lieutenant Commander Holt's rig in hydroponics within the East Grow chamber after destroying a collection of clusters. The final rig I collected before continuing the story was Hangar Overseer Volkir's rig, found in the hangar back at the start of Chapter 3, which you could go back to from engineering via the way you originally got in. Finally getting back to what Isaac's supposed to be doing, he takes the elevator down to comms from the bridge's atrium. After dealing with some guardians, Isaac enters the comms access hall and heads to the comms control room. Daniel says the Valor's in a holding position and asks what's the damage. Isaac says it's not much. He could replace the broken dishes, creating a new circuit without any gaps, and that would give them short-range communication. Isaac enters Bailey's office and grabs his rig for the master override. Isaac then heads into the communications array. This is basically a pipe puzzle. All you need to do is have one single connection from start to end. Starting from the power source, get a pipe going right then up, then a pipe going up and right, then a pipe going right and up, then a pipe going up and left, and a pipe going left and up. This creates a closed connection and solves the puzzle. With comms back online, Daniel tells Isaac to open a channel to the Valor. He does this back in the comms control room where the Valor says they received the SOS and picked up an escape pod and we're heading to the Ishimura. Wait, an escape pod? I knew it! Hammond should have let Isaac kill the necromorph turned Ted instead of blasting it into space. Oh, Valor, you are dead. You are like dead. Daniel tries to patch into the Valor, but her signal wasn't strong enough. Isaac suggests deploying the long-range antenna, but Daniel says something was blocking it, so he decides to head up to comms maintenance to manually deploy it. Isaac takes a gondola over to the maintenance area, where I use a workbench to upgrade the Ripper's damage. In the adjoining room, a new enemy is introduced, the Divider. The Divider is very lanky, and doesn't do much in terms of attack, but once it's killed, it splits into a bunch of the remainders. Unfortunately, this cannot be avoided, unlike the Pregnants. Isaac enters the maintenance lock room and finds a weapon upgrade for the plasma cutter. Isaac calls the elevator to maintenance. Excuse me? I'm trying to use this. Gee, necromorphs can be so rude. Isaac takes the elevator down and enters the comms maintenance and activates the manual release, but the blast doors were still obstructed. What could possibly be obstructing Go? It's the Leviathan. Of course. Isaac needed to get the remnant off quickly, and thinks to use the ADS cannon's manual targeting again to shoot it off. The Leviathan remnant is the second boss fight of the game. It begins similar to the first fight, only being able to launch its tentacles at you, though now you're in the vacuum of space or limited on air, but there's refill stations about in the arena. By connecting to the ADS cannons, you can shoot through glowing cracks on its shell until they burst open, revealing its glowing innards, which can also be shot at until it bursts. Once it does, it'll destroy the cannon you're using and gain some new attacks. Now it can do an arena sweep with its tentacles, which can be dodged by just moving out of its way. The cannon to the left needs a cluster destroyed in order to be accessed, and when connecting to the second cannon, the Leviathan will begin to shoot out its cluster bombs. You could kinesis these back at it, but I find it easier to just dodge them while shooting with the cannon. With the second cluster down, it destroys the cannon. The Leviathan now fills the arena with what are essentially sea mines, but they have enough space to move around between them and even get destroyed by the tentacle sweep attack. At the third cannon, it will begin a combination of the tentacle launch attack and the bomb attack. Once the cell is destroyed, it'll prematurely destroy the cannon, leading you to burst its innards with your weapons. I chose the contact beam, and after a few seconds of its blast, the Leviathan remnant is killed, getting me another achievement: get off my ship. Isaac tells Daniels it's dead, and she says to hit the release as she has her transmission ready to send. Back inside, Isaac deploys the antenna, and Daniel's transmission plays, telling them not to open the escape pod. Footage cuts to the Valor, and yeah, they opened it. Unfortunately, they were also heading directly for the Ishimura and crashed directly into her. Isaac heads out of the unsealed comm maintenance, and Hammond asks what's going on, so Daniels fills him in. Hammond then goes on to talk about an intact executive shuttle he found on the crew deck that they could use, but Daniel shuts the idea down as that shuttle didn't have a singularity core, but then Isaac speaks up and says the Valor singularity core might still be intact and they could use that for the shuttle. Hammond tells Isaac to meet him on board the Valor, so Isaac heads out into space and makes his way to the crashed Valor. Hammond tells Isaac he's on board and he's going to try to make it to the bridge before being interrupted by the sounds of a necromorph. Isaac reaches the Valor and this gets me another achievement, Strange Transmissions, for completing Chapter 8. Heading inside, the ship was a disaster, already in a far worse state than the Ishimura. Hammond calls Isaac, telling him about a problem he wants him to solve. There is a 12 megaton warhead on the Valor, and the impact hit its holding bay hard. Hammond wants Isaac to get rid of the bomb before something sets it off. Isaac enters a hallway which has another new enemy, the Twitcher. Twitchers are essentially extremely fast slashers, however, you need not waste your stasis on these guys as they have a stasis pack inside them, which if shot at activates a free stasis, giving you plenty of time to kill them before they speed up again. Going into the briefing room, Isaac takes out this battery, which summons a few Twitchers. Once they're dead, Isaac replaces the battery for the elevator outside and heads down to the lower decks. On the right, a scientist calls Isaac, saying he needs to speak with him. Isaac asks who this was, and he reveals himself to be Dr. Kine, the same one that killed the captain and studied the marker. Isaac had enough of anyone who worked for or in unitology, so coldly ended the transmission. Isaac reached the torpedo bay and began carefully shooting the safety locks when an exploder comes in to attack Isaac. Like a moth to a flame. Trying that again, Isaac shoots off all the safety locks and doesn't shoot the explosive bomb cluster on the exploder. He finds a battery in the back and powers up the ordnance control system, then releases the warhead, putting an end to that problem. Hammond calls Isaac again, confirming the warhead was dealt with, but Isaac brings up a good point. Why did the Valor have a nuke ready to launch if they were just out on patrol? Hammond found it odd as well, so he was going through the munitions report to find out more. Hammond also clears the route for Isaac to get to the engine room. Heading to the armory, I get the next achievement, Full Contact, for killing 30 enemies with a contact beam. Inside the armory, Isaac finds a shooting range and decides to test his skill, but sadly gets quarantined as enemies begin to horde in. After dealing with all the enemies, I get another achievement, Front Toward Enemy, for surviving the shooting range. Isaac then goes into the infirmary, where he finds the schematics for a large med pack. After using stasis on the fast-moving medical lasers to get past them, another Twitcher spawns, which after using stasis on them, I get yet another achievement, Freeze, for using stasis on 50 enemies. Heading towards the cargo bay, Hammond calls Isaac, swearing he's hearing Chin on the radio, but even after Isaac assures him that Chin is dead as they watched him die, Hammond refuses to believe it, going to investigate. Inside the cargo bay, Isaac finds the escape pod Chin was jettisoned, and then the entire bay goes on quarantine as another wave of enemies come to fight Isaac. Once they were dealt with, Hammond calls Isaac as he heads to the engine room, telling him it wasn't just a nuke, the Valor was loaded, seek and destroy. His best and only guess was someone knew about the Ishimura and wanted it gone. He even goes to proclaim that they were all dead from the moment they arrived. The engine room had several leaks, forcing Isaac to wait until the fire stopped to continue moving, eventually making him use boxes to block the flames entirely. After using the box some more, he's able to enable the fire suppression system and the lift to the engine core. Once up there, Isaac starts making it to the engine core when it locks down to a quarantine, unfortunately trapping a mentally unwell Hammond. The necromorph turned Chin bursts into the room and stabs Hammond, similar to how Chin was stabbed. This brings Hammond back from his stupor, and as a last act of heroism, he forces himself and the necromorph turned Chin into the singularity core, disintegrating both of them. The lockdown lifts and Isaac grabs the singularity core. As he makes his way out of the ship, Daniels calls him where Isaac updates her on the Hammond's sacrifice, but the conversation is cut short as Daniel realizes the Valor was going to explode, so Isaac skedaddles off the ship, making it just in time before it explodes, and re-enters the Ishimura via retracting long-range antenna. As Isaac makes his way out of the comms array, Daniels calls him, where he informs her he's okay. Daniels tells Isaac that the Twitchers are now on board the Ishimura and asks about the singularity core, which Isaac did thankfully have. Daniel says the shuttle is on the crew deck and that someone just opened a way to the crew deck from the bridge. This gets me my next achievement, Wreckage, for completing Chapter 9.
Mercer, wait. Tell me. I want to understand. What is convergence?
Back at the bridge atrium, Isaac takes the hallway to the tram station, where the newly unlocked door is. This had access to the tram tunnel, and instead of continuing down the next area, Isaac heads the other way where he finds Transfer Advisor Benson's rig. This mini had all the rigs required to make the master override. Isaac takes a lift up to the crew deck station, where I use the nearby upgrade bench to upgrade the suit's stasis size, max air, kinetic throw range, kinetic throw damage, stasis duration, and max health. Isaac enters the station and lifts the lockdown, right as Daniels calls him to inform him about the crew deck. It was on lockdown and the marker was interfering with Isaac's signal. She says to lift the lockdown, he'd need an override keycard from the crew's deck's gym. Instead of doing this, Isaac decides to go on a questing binge, heading back to the nest to create the master override, which gets me an achievement, Full Clearance. Scattered about the map are doors and containers which you need the master override to open. I went ahead and grabbed as many as I could, as they mostly feature weapon upgrades. The first box I opened was in engineering, in the machine shop where you get the Ripper, and coincidentally enough, this box gives you an upgrade for the Ripper. The next one was on the mining deck and tool storage, which you can find near the tram station after moving the kinesis objects out of the way. This one had an upgrade for the contact beam. As I continued exploring for these boxes, I got another achievement, Backbreaker, for killing 10 enemies with Isaac's Stomp. I stopped at the Bridge store to buy the remaining purchasable weapon upgrades for the pulse rifle, flamethrower, line gun, and force gun. I then found another Master Override exclusive door in the bridge to the right after getting off the elevator to the water purification room. This room gives an upgrade for the pulse rifle. The next use for the override I found was in hydroponics in the area to the mining tram station. This box gave an upgrade for the line gun. Through my explorations, I also found a flamethrower upgrade in the mining deck's maintenance subdeck, in a room on the lower level in the equipment maintenance bay, a contact beam upgrade in the medical deck's bioprosthetics locker room, and an upgrade for the line gun in the medical deck's lab storage on the way to cryogenics. Back at the crew deck station, Isaac heads inside the common area, then towards the 0G gym. He enters a locker room and finds the final suit upgrade schematic. Entering the actual gym, he finds an area where he can play Z-Ball, a fantasy sport involving zero gravity. It's easy enough to play. Throw a ball into one of the holes to get scored to progress to the next stage. Some holes will light up and grant extra score when a ball is thrown into it. As levels progress, some holes will periodically get covered up, which increases in intensity the higher the stage. Isaac was a natural and makes a joke out of the sport, clearing all the stages without breaking a sweat. This gives me an achievement, Z-Baller, for completing level 6 in Z-Ball. There was a power cell in the Z-Ball core, and Isaac uses it to power a lift to the viewing platform, where he gets the override keycard for the crew deck. Back at the common area, Isaac upgrades his suit to the max level, before using the keycard to open an elevator, heading down to the central nexus. Here, Isaac witnesses Jacob confronting Mercer, trying to kill him, but Mercer stasises him. Isaac chimes in right before Mercer shoots Jacob, and he goes on to talk about how his convergence is still denied, this time blaming Jacob. Isaac asks what convergence is, but Mercer says he already knows. Mercer, why would Isaac ask if he didn't already know? Mercer asks Isaac if he wants to be reunited with the people he's lost, making Isaac hesitate for a second. Mercer tries to take this opportunity to get Isaac on his side, but Isaac comes to his senses. Mercer wasn't pleased with this and shoots the stasis Jacob, killing him. He then leaves, seeking the hunter on Isaac. Isaac shoots a nearby cluster, and this lets him access the mess hall. Here he gets auditory hallucinations of his dead crew, even hearing the voices of corpses repeating the first lines of Nicole's video seen at the start of the game. These thankfully stop, and Isaac heads down, and I use the upgrade bench to upgrade the contact beam's secondary fire damage, primary fire damage, and its second special, granting a major increase in ammunition capacity. I also upgrade the Ripper's capacity, duration, its first special, which gives the assaults an additional ricochet, its reload speed, its damage, and its third special, which does the same as the other two. Isaac enters the standard quarters and clears away to more of the quarters, where he finds another cluster and destroys it. He then rushes back to the Nexus and now has access to the second floor and the deluxe quarters. Entering them, a quarantine stops Isaac from progressing, so he takes care of the necromorphs until he enters a hallway leading to more quarters. One of the rooms had a power cell, which allowed Isaac to power up the lights or the doors. He powers the doors and enters the guest consultant suite, where a vision of an earlier video call between Isaac and Nicole plays. Isaac tells Nicole his mother killed herself after killing his father due to unitology. When Nicole goes to complain about the brainwashing unitology does, Isaac stops her, saying she said his mother was better and that she might as well kill them herself. Nicole goes to defend herself before realizing she doesn't need to take this, so ends the call, leaving Isaac panicked as he was now alone. Isaac hears Nicole's voice repeating the first few lines of her video to Isaac again, making Isaac realize she wants to talk and that he can still fix things. The door to Mercer's room opens and Isaac gets an upgrade for the force gun. He then watches a hologram of Nicole investigating the room before getting caught by Mercer. Nicole bluffs and sides with Mercer, pretending to believe in his ideas just so he'd leave her alone. This works, I think, as Mercer tells her to leave the marker to him and lets her leave. This was unfortunately as far as her manual rig tracking went, and earned me another achievement, whole again, for completing the scientific methods side quest. Isaac finds the cluster in the deluxe quarters and destroys it. He then enters one of the deluxe quarters and finds a master override box, which had a flamethrower upgrade inside it. He heads back to the Nexus, where you can now access the executive quarters. Heading inside, Isaac enters the bathrooms and finds an executive quarters keycard alongside destroying another cluster. Back inside the executive quarters, a quarantine lockdown initiates and Isaac takes care of the necromorphs. Using the keycard, Isaac accesses Holt's quarters and finds a master override box containing a gold semiconductor. I expected a weapon upgrade or even a ruby semiconductor, which sells for more at the shop, but okay. On the way back to the central nexus, I get another achievement, Legend Teller, for picking up 150 logs. Back at the nexus, Isaac now had access to the Chief Steward offices, where he meets Dr. Kind face to face. Isaac tells him to let him in so he can destroy the cluster, but Kind hesitates, instead explaining what he was trying to tell Isaac earlier. He says that when they took the marker, it woke something deep within Aegis 7, a being Mercer calls the Hive Mind, which controls the Necromorphs via telepathy. Kyne tells Isaac they need to return the marker to the planet to put the Hive Mind back to sleep. Isaac agrees, and Kyne says he'll distract Mercer before leaving. Isaac then destroys the cluster, and I use a nearby upgrade bench to max out the Ripper. Isaac then returns to the ground floor of the Central Nexus, where he gets quarantined again. After dealing with the waves of enemies, Isaac uses the loader to move the marker to the shuttle. He then heads to the shuttle and installs the Singularity Core, which prompts a required test of the engines. Once Isaac tests them, the Hunter comes back, but Isaac thinks of a way to stop the Hunter for good. He lures it to the back of the engines, uses stasis to freeze it in place, then blasts the Hunter, killing it for good. When Isaac leaves, he's grabbed by a tentacle, and is greeted by a very displeased Mercer, who tries to commune with the marker to bring convergence, but who would have guessed a tentacle wraps around him in the marker, killing him and taking the marker away. Isaac then gets dragged away and cuts the tentacle off of him. He gets a call from Kyne, making sure Isaac was okay. Isaac then checks on Daniels, who was also fine, and she informs him that the ship's system wasn't critical, as the tentacle ripped through the ship, and that the marker was now at the cargo bay. Isaac tells Kyne to get the shuttle to the cargo bay, but Daniels, who wasn't alerted in the slightest about Isaac helping Kyne, was skeptical about him, but once Isaac told her Kyne's plan, she seemed on board. Isaac asked her to ping Nicole's rig so they could all leave as he was going for the marker. This gets me an achievement, Keeper of the Faith, for completing Chapter 10. Isaac begins to head back to the hangar's tram station when Kyne calls him, letting him know they were almost at the hangar bay. Daniels voices her complaints about Kyne having their only escape shuttle, then goes to tell Isaac that everything he's killed has pulled up in the cargo bay, hanging onto the marker. Isaac says the Ishimura's cargo crane should be able to get it out no problem, which Daniels agrees that could work. Arriving at the cargo bay, Isaac shoots clusters to make space for the marker to move around, then begins to move it to the hangar bay. As the marker is moved, Necromorphs begin to swarm Isaac, and even a new enemy appears, a tentacle. It doesn't do much, just tries to crush Isaac and can be killed by shooting the glowing cluster on it. I find another Master Override crate, and it contained an upgrade for the Force Gun. As Isaac explores the cargo bay, he moves some boxes and finds a locker, which contained Pang, a valuable treasure, and this gets me an achievement. There's always Pang. In order to move the marker, Isaac had to lift bridges, which summons more enemies, and after juggling these two actions, the marker gets lifted to the hangar bay. Daniels confirms this and asks Kyne to pick her up. Isaac, looking out for Daniels, wanted to make sure she could make it there by herself, which she says she's just going to run for it. Isaac begins to head back to the hangar bay, and on the way, I stop by an upgrade bench where I get another achievement, built to order, for installing every weapon upgrade. I take a quick detour back to the air filtration tower and hydroponics, as in one of the room offshoots lie the schematics for Force Energy, and this gets me another achievement, Merchant, for obtaining every schematic. As Isaac heads up to the flight lounge, Daniels calls him, panicking because she saw her dead brother again by the airlock she was going to. Thankfully, he disappeared, so she made a break for it. As Isaac was going to the hangar bay, another quarantine stops him, and he hears whispers of Hammond's voice before some necromorphs appear. He keeps hearing Hammond's voice, with the quarantine ending after Hammond repeats what he said back on the Valor. Inside the hangar bay, the shuttle arrives, with Daniels safely on board. Of course, Isaac couldn't board it yet, as the automated loading controls couldn't be ran, so Isaac had to load the marker on manually. He disables gravity and begins the manual loading. He uses controls to turn the tracks, powered by a circuit he powered back in Chapter 3, and he repeats this until the marker reached the ship. Also, the circuit can power a shutter door, which has a security clearance level 3 box inside that gives a diamond semiconductor, which sells for 25,000 credits. After restoring gravity, Kyne loads the marker, and Daniels has to open the hatch for Isaac. As Isaac heads to board the shuttle... Why? Why? Daniels kills Kyne, and then takes off in the shuttle without Isaac. Daniels calls Isaac and explains everything. She works for EarthGov, and Aegis 7 was one of their experiments where they built the marker, a reverse-engineered replica of the true marker found on Earth. They buried everything to do with Aegis 7 in the red marker after mass reports of the stuff of nightmares, basically everything Isaac has seen up to this point, but CEC got greedy and started mining on Aegis 7, where they found the marker, reawakened the horrors that were left behind. Isaac said they should still return it to the planet, but before he could continue, Daniel says it could disappear again, as she knows how the marker can mess with people's heads, so it needs to be contained. She says they made a good team, and that she's sure Isaac would find another way off the ship before ending the call. Soon, Isaac gets a call from Nicole telling him to meet her in the flight control room. Arriving there, Nicole and Isaac have their proper reunion, where Isaac says he knows about what she's been through, talking about her investigation with Mercer and the call between them, and says that he's sorry, which Nicole forgives him. She says they can manually recall the shuttle bags in the hangar. Isaac does this, much to Daniel's dismay, as she ejects herself from the ship. The shuttle soon docks, and Isaac says that if they got on the ship, there would be no going back. Nicole says she'll program the ship to take him to Aegis 7 and join him on board. Isaac heads down and boards the ship, with Nicole joining him shortly, and they take off, with the marker seemingly messing with Isaac's head several times during the trip. Isaac catches Nicole up that this whole thing was an experiment by EarthGov, and they soon arrive on the planet, with Nicole saying that the planet is restless and repeating what she said the last time they talked, that they'll put things back the way they were and that they'll be whole again. Isaac gets up and begins to head to the planet, and this gets me another achievement, Betrayed, for completing Chapter 11.
How do we do this?
Return the marker to its pedestal. The loading track leads directly to the excavation site.
Isaac steps off the ship and unloads the marker. Nicole mentions lights in the skies, and Isaac notes that the gravity tethers on the Ishimura are failing, and the rock they were mining was going to crash down the planet, so they'd have to hurry. Nicole says they need to return the marker to its pedestal, and thankfully the loading track leads directly to it, and once it was there, this timer would end and they'd be whole again. Okay, Nicole, you're reaching your limit on how many times you can say that before it starts getting weird. Isaac enters the living quarters, and Nicole says she'll help him guide the marker from the control room. Inside the quarters, Isaac enters the server room, grabbing a power cell as Nicole explains how the marker works. Its signal changes anyone who intercepts it, but the marker has a dead space where the signal doesn't work. The pedestal on the planet amplifies that dead space. Isaac uses the power cell to power the loading shutter, and I use the building's upgrade bench to upgrade the stasis' duration and its energy, while also upgrading the contact beam's capacity, its third special, which makes the explosion of the alt-fire larger, its capacity, and its first special, which increases the size of the alt-fire's projectile. Isaac begins the marker's transfer and enters the supply depot, where the place gets quarantined. After dealing with the necromorphs, the quarantine lifts, and Isaac begins to transfer the marker to the transfer junction, then heads there himself. Nicole tells Isaac that there wasn't any power in the section, so moving the marker would be impossible. The tether generator had a power failure, so Isaac had to go and fix it. He heads down and uses several power cells, even the one that was powering the lift he took to get here, to reactivate the tether generator, which restored power. This causes the room to lose its gravity, so he heads back up, where Nicole calls him to confirm the power was restored, and said to make them whole. Okay, her repeating that statement is officially weird. Isaac slows down some fans and makes it back to the junction and moves the marker to the next area. Inside the storage chamber, Isaac shoots a cluster to clear a path for the marker. He heads up and shoots another cluster, which cleared a complete path to move the marker to the excavation site. Here, Isaac had to shoot more clusters to clear a path for the marker, and with them cleared, he is able to transport the marker back to its pedestal. Once it's back on, Nicole shows up and stands next to the marker, saying they're whole. The colony computer states that the tectonic load from the Ishimura was about to crash down onto the planet, so Isaac goes to the control center to restart the tether to buy them some more time. Unfortunately, the computer was taking a long time to restart the tether, and Isaac sees Daniels walking up to him, holding Nicole at gunpoint. Isaac tells her to let her go, but Daniels asks who specifically, calling him delusional. Isaac tries to get them all to leave the planet, but Daniels overrides his rig, playing the video Nicole sent him back at the start of the game, this time telling him to watch to the end. This time, after watching past what he has seen, Nicole laments about taking the marker, even trying to pray for it to stop what it was doing, but she couldn't fix this, and after telling Isaac that she's always loved him, she euthanizes herself, meaning Nicole's been dead since the beginning of the game. The game actually hints at this, as if you take the first letter of the first word in every chapter's name, it actually spells out Nicole is dead. Daniels reveals that who Isaac has been seeing as Nicole was actually Elizabeth, the one from Hydroponics, and she was seeing him as Jacob Temple. The game also hints at this reveal, as during Chapter 7, when Isaac first reunites with what he thinks is Nicole, if you turn off the gravity and go to where she was, you can obtain a security log where it states that Elizabeth found Isaac, but he wasn't really responding to what she was saying, though interestingly, she wasn't seeing Isaac as Jacob yet. Daniels then kills Elizabeth for the loader remote and begins to transfer it back to the ship. Isaac needed to get back to the shuttle and fast, and thankfully there was an access tunnel back to the living quarters. Upon exiting to the landing pad, he intercepts Daniels, who tries to run onto the ship, but gets slapped off by a tentacle and then swiftly crushed. Soon more tentacles appear, blocking Isaac in, as the hive mind makes its grand entrance, and Isaac challenges it, saying this is all he has left. The fight with the hive mind begins, and in its first phase, it's able to shoot out cluster bombs that stick to the landing pad and explode over time or if hit, and can smash its tentacles onto the pad. In order to kill it, you need to shoot at the glowing clusters near its mouth. Once all the clusters are exploded, it'll enter its second phase, where it swarms you with enemies, but it just doesn't attack you. Necromorphs may be rude, but the hive mind is not. Once the enemies are all dealt with, it'll enter its final phase, where it starts by barraging you with its tentacle smack attack before opening its chest cavity, which has several clusters inside. Once a cluster is destroyed, it'll close the cavity and spew acid onto the landing pad, restricting your available space to move around during its tentacle attack, but all you really have to do is just move left and right to avoid the attacks. After a bit, it'll reopen the cavity to repeat the cycle. When enough clusters are destroyed, it'll extend its spewing attack, this time firing it several times at you, with the acid trail quickly dissipating before using the original arena limiting version. Once all the clusters are defeated, the hive mind goes, oh, never mind, it has another phase. This one's exactly like the earlier tentacle grab segment, so all you need to do is shoot at the cluster in the center of its mouth, and once it explodes, the hive mind is killed. This gets me an achievement, Mindless Prey. Isaac rushes back onto the ship and manages to make it to orbit before the tectonic load crashes back into the planet. Isaac takes off his helmet before turning on Nicole's video again, but stopping it quickly after. He then hears Nicole's voice and looks to the seat next to him, seeing a hallucination of her body before it jumps at him. And thus ends the first playthrough of Dead Space, netting me 2 more achievements: set a benchmark for completing the game on the medium difficulty or higher, and Exodus for completing Chapter 12. Where's the footage? Oh, right. So when I began recording the footage for Dead Space, OBS was outputting the file to 4 times the size of my screen, meaning it only captured 1/4 of the game's footage. I was able to fix this, but anytime I started to record again, I did an output test just to make sure the resolution stayed, and deleted that test afterwards. I was also trying a new system of organization, where instead of having OBS put the footage files into one folder then sort it later, I kept switching the output folder to whatever playthrough I was on. Well, on one of the tests during my next playthrough, I realized something funny happened in the test after I deleted it and tried to Control-Z the file back, but it didn't work, so I kept Control-Zing just in case I had done something else, and then suddenly I was booted to the parent folder with the folder that had all the footage for the next playthrough in gone. I tried Control-Zing to undo, Control-Ying to redo, but the folder wouldn't come back. This wouldn't be a problem if not for the fact that when you have an application like OBS that can install files into a folder and that folder's creation gets undone, instead of doing anything sensible like putting the contents of the folder in the parent folder, putting them in the recycling bin, or even warning you that the folder you're trying to undo has files inside it, all the files just get wiped. It also wouldn't be a problem if I hadn't obtained 6 achievements in that footage and made it to the start of Chapter 11. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any way to retrieve the files, so they were just gone for good. Thankfully, the achievements were easily replicated, so I do have footage of how I would have gotten them, and I also learned a nice trick to prevent this in the future. If you are someone who has an application that installs files into folders, again like OBS, and have a Control-Z trigger finger, I'd recommend that anytime you create a folder that application will install into, you use Task Manager to restart File Explorer. This basically clears the File Explorer's undo history, so the only way for the folder to be unmade is by physically deleting it yourself. This works on Windows, though I think similar steps can be taken with other operating systems. Getting into the actual playthrough, this had to be done on New Game Plus, which actually unlocks some new content. In standard New Game Plus fashion, you keep all the items you had in the previous save file, including suit upgrades, weapon attachments, and power node upgrades, shop schematic, stasis upgrade, and the master override keycard. In addition, you get 50,000 credits and 10 power nodes in addition to the amount you had previously. New Game Plus also gives you the true final suit upgrade. Now, I would go into detail about the playthrough, but to be honest, there's not much different compared to the first playthrough. New Game Plus does add some quote-unquote new enemies in areas, but these are just tankier versions of enemies that already exist, and since you keep all your weapon upgrades, they're not much of a threat. Starting off this run, I got the next achievement, Pack Rat, for having 25 items in storage, mainly because New Game Plus forces your entire previous inventory into storage to be picked back up at the end of Chapter 1. Skipping to the room where you collect the replacement data board, Isaac finds a marker fragment. These are unique to New Game Plus, and there are 12 of them scattered about the Ishimura, roughly 1 for each chapter, though 2 chapters have an additional one since Chapter 9 can't be returned to and Chapter 12 is the finale. I'll talk about the marker fragments as I find them. This got me an achievement marked for picking one up. At the end of Chapter 1, I upgraded the suit to the final level, which makes the total damage reduction 30% while also looking pretty cool, but since I did a playthrough looking at this already, I decided to change it to one of the additional outfits he had available in storage. While heading to get the hydrazine tank, I got another achievement, Wishbone, for pulling an enemy's limb off with Kinesis. The easiest way to do this is by setting the game on hard mode, finding an enemy, using stasis on them, shooting at an enemy's limb with the pulse rifle, then when it looks like it's holding on by a thread, use Kinesis to tear it off. While inside the research wing, I entered Kyne's office and used Kinesis on this bookcase to reveal a secret room, which had another fragment. On the way out of medical, I got an achievement, Autofire, for killing 30 enemies with the pulse rifle. While inside the machine shop in Chapter 3, I massively upgrade the Force Gun with several upgrades in reload speed, capacity, damage, and rate of fire, while also unlocking each special upgrade, which makes the alt-fire deal damage over time, last much longer, and have a larger radius respectively. On the way to the engine room in engineering, I get another achievement, Pusher, for killing 30 enemies with the Force Gun. While inside the engine room, I find a fragment behind one of the engines. During Chapter 4, I find another fragment inside the break room. During Chapter 5, I learned of a way to insta-kill the Guardians, which is done by firing the flamethrower's alt-fire directly into their chest cavity while their tendrils are exposed. Safe to say, I'd be using this trick on any encounter with them. Chapter 5 is one of the chapters where multiple fragments can be obtained. One can be found in Mercer's office, and the other is found above the cryogenic freezer in Cryogenics. While going to Hydroponics, I managed to get the next achievement, Eviscerator, for killing 30 enemies with the line gun. I used an upgrade bench to fully max out the contact beam, force gun, and plasma cutter, including its final special, which makes melee hits with the cutter have a chance to knock enemies prone. I also upgrade the suit's kinetic throw damage, kinesis grab range, and the duration of stasis. In Hydroponics East Grow Chamber with the gravity disabled, I found another fragment near the ceiling. Near the mining deck, I fully upgrade the suit. I found another fragment on the processing subdeck inside the mineral samples room. I find the next fragment inside the comms array. Chapter 10 also has 2 fragments. The first can be found in the deluxe quarters wing after powering the doors. It's inside one of the deluxe quarters on the way back to the central nexus. The other is found in the steward's offices, inside the room Dr. Kyne is in. Within the executive quarters, I find a strange shrine inside the captain's room, and interacting with it places all the fragments I found so far, so I need to come back here after collecting all 12. The final fragment is found in the cargo bay, so now that I had all 12, I went back to the shrine and activated it. This doesn't change a whole lot in terms of gameplay, but it does change up some dialogue in Chapter 12. Most notably, it changes Isaac's line at the start of the Hive Mind fight, now stating that it showed him what to do and it can't stop him. Speaking of the Hive Mind, that fight went just as well as last time, and the ending's a bit different now. The entire ship now has the marker symbols drawn all over it, and the Nicole hallucination is more vivid and actually speaks to him, asking if they were going home, but Isaac says he was building a little surprise for her first, something she would like. This ends the run and gets me 2 more achievements: Reunion for seeing the alternate ending, and Trusted Contractor for completing New Game Plus. Before continuing to the next playthrough, I had 1 achievement I could now easily obtain. In the previous playthrough, I was gathering as many power nodes as I could get my hands on, and so I started another run of New Game Plus using my completed New Game Plus playthrough and made it to the end of Chapter 1, bought as many power nodes as I could, then maxed out every single weapon. I'll quickly talk about each of their specials, going from the first special to the third. Starting off, the pulse rifle gets increased fire rate, increased ammo capacity, and grenades have a larger blast radius. The flamethrower gets a duration increase for its ult, increased primary attack range, and increased ammo capacity. And the line gun gets increased alt fire damage, for the alt fire's traps to have 3 targeting lasers instead of 1, and another trap damage increase. With that, every weapon was fully upgraded, including the suit, and I get the next achievement, maxed out. Now there are only 2 achievements left, each one requiring a full playthrough. Though they could be done in tandem, I decided not to do that. The 2 achievements are for beating the game on impossible difficulty and for completing the game with only the plasma cutter. I decided to go ahead and do impossible mode. So what exactly is impossible mode? In terms of difficulty, it's on par with hard mode, as it takes more damage while enemies take less, but with 2 caveats. You only get a single save file slot, which doesn't mean much to me as I've been using this stipulation on all my playthroughs because I like doing that, and you only get 1 life, meaning if you die, you don't get booted back to your last save, you have to restart the entire playthrough. Before getting into the actual run, I'd like to talk about the loadout and general strategy I was going to use for the run. Starting off with the loadout, the plasma cutter is a versatile weapon, though I don't really use it much in terms of combat unless it's against the lurkers and exploders or a singled out enemy, as I prefer to use it for clusters or shooting the lock nodes. Next was the Ripper, which I believe is the most powerful weapon in the game. Not only can you essentially stun lock several enemies with it just by waving the saw between their limbs, but ammo for this weapon comes in spades. Each fire of the Ripper shoots 1 blade and holds it out for a duration that can be upgraded, and you can kill as many enemies as you want with that blade unless you get hit. As long as a single enemy drops ammo, which always has 3 blades, you can essentially get a positive feedback loop of ammo, where you spend 1 blade to kill a group of enemies, then get 3 or more back from enemy drops. This is going to be my main weapon for a majority of encounters. Next, the contact beam. I pretty much use this as my panic weapon. If any enemy got too close, I'd switch to this weapon and just beam them down. I've heard the alt fire is good, but I personally never saw any use with it and had more fun just blasting enemies to dust with the primary fire. For bosses and brutes, this was going to be the weapon I'd use against them. And for the 4th weapon, as you can only have 4 hotkeyed, I went with the flamethrower. I'm not a huge fan of its primary, but its alt fire is good against swarmers, guardians, and dividers, as well as being good for areas with a bottleneck hallway, so every enemy just runs into the firewall. I know I said the force gun is the most useful weapon, and I still stand by that, but it's obtained all the way in Chapter 6, whereas all the ones I'm choosing are obtained by Chapter 4. Also, the flamethrower does what I would have been using the force gun for, and doesn't need to be upgraded to uphold that power, meaning I could instead spend valuable power nodes on upgrades for the Ripper suit. Now for the general strategy. Due to the 3 basically full playthroughs, I've gotten good at using all the combat mechanics like stasis and kinesis, with kinesis being way more powerful than I originally thought. Metal poles are very easily found, and can be carried to most places, giving you an entire free kill as soon as a battle starts. Couple that with the 2 free spikes most enemies leave, and you can solve a majority of combat encounters without really needing to use your weapons, which saves on ammo for more difficult encounters. I didn't really feel like I needed to watch out for a majority of enemies, the only ones I actually paid attention to were exploders and the guardians, which both essentially have an insta-kill. I'd also be saving as much money as possible to spend on medpacks, as the shop has an endless supply of all its supplies so long as you have the credits and schematics. Other than that, I would be taking my time, not trying to rush things and accidentally mess up and lose the run. With that out of the way, here's what went down in the first attempt. Chapter 1 didn't have much going on. I get the plasma cutter and the first suit upgrade the suit's health for better survivability, as well as upgrading the plasma cutter. I then got the stasis module and absolutely abused it in the next section since it has several recharge stations. I actually use it a lot during this playthrough just because these recharge stations are so abundant. At the end of Chapter 1, I upgrade the suit to the next level and upgrade the suit's nose even further. Starting the second chapter, I get the kinesis module and begin using it as much as I could. Nothing much else happened during Chapter 2 other than another upgrade for health, so soon I was on to Chapter 3, where I was able to get the Ripper. I massively upgrade the Ripper as well as working towards another health upgrade for the suit. The centrifuge was a little scary as it can insta-kill you, but thankfully I learned the timings on it and made it pass with no issue. I then got the flamethrower, and it's nice to know the firewall still easily kills the swarmers on this difficulty. Chapter 4 introduces the Brute, and even without the contact beam, Stasis plus the Ripper make short work of it. I upgrade my Ripper some more and finally get the contact beam, now having my entire chosen arsenal. Before going on to the next chapter, I upgrade the suit to the 3rd level with additional node upgrades for it. Chapter 5 has the first instance with Guardians, and thankfully the insta-kill still works on them. The Hunter could have been troublesome, but Stasis and the Ripper work just as well on it. I make sure to pick up the tissue sample so I could start and later complete the premeditated malpractice side quest for the Stasis upgrade. I upgrade the plasma cutter some and even get its first special. On to chapter 6, what hit me? Stupid door. Anywho, in chapter 6, I upgrade the Ripper some more, get the next health upgrade, and take on the Leviathan, who goes down pretty easily with the contact beam. During chapter 7, I upgrade both the contact beam and the Ripper, as well as get the Stasis module upgrade after completing the side quest. I also upgrade to the next suit level in this chapter. Chapter 8 doesn't have much going on aside from the Leviathan Remnant, but why? Why are the doors doing this to me? This hasn't happened on any of the other playthroughs, why now? Whatever. Before facing against the Remnant, I upgrade the suit and contact beam. The Remnant fight was great, somehow easier than the previous fight. I guess that's because of the upgrades, but I was now onto chapter 9. Thankfully, I didn't mess up in the Warhead room and also escaped the shooting gallery as I wasn't risking it. Chapter 10 also doesn't have much going on other than upgrading the suit to base max level, with some more node upgrades to it as well. I was originally going to complete the Master Override side quest, but decided against it as I felt pretty powerful at this point. I had a backlog of ammo, a ridiculous amount of credits to spend on ammo or medpacks if need be, a maxed out suit with several well upgraded weapons, as I also upgraded my plasma cutter here a bit. So yeah, I felt pretty good at this point. The fear of mortality has been reinstilled into me. Okay, so in every run, I keep forgetting the tentacles are enemies. Thankfully, I learned that they can be stasis like other enemies, don't know why I didn't think of that, so they basically became a non-issue. I soon arrived at chapter 12. I upgraded the plasma cutter some more, even getting its second special. There was a close encounter with an exploder, the exact reason I wanted to make sure I paid attention to that enemy, but soon I made it to before the hive mind fight. Now, I was a bit nervous. I am still on my first attempt at this, and dying now would mean having to go back through the entire game again. I stocked up on medpacks and ammo and began the fight. Despite my nerves, I managed to pull it off, defeating the hive mind and making it to the shuttle, finishing impossible mode and getting me another achievement, Untouchable. Also, being impossible mode and starting a new game plus with its save file unlocks this really cool armor and a brand new weapon, the hand cannon, which just insta-kills every enemy while Isaac makes gun noises when he shoots. The final achievement was for beating the game with only the plasma cutter. Now, I had a few worries going into this run. What exactly counted as just using the plasma cutter? Would ammo be a concern? And how difficult would the bosses be without the contact beam? What constituted as just using the plasma cutter was definitely my biggest worry, as I didn't want to complete the entire game just to learn I didn't get the achievement because an enemy tripped and died. Luckily, the game is very lenient on what just using the plasma cutter means. Basically, you can still use anything in your arsenal so long as the only gun you ever fire is the plasma cutter. So you can use kinesis to throw rods, enemy spikes, or environmental explosives, and stasis to freeze enemies, and even the stasis upgrade to tear away at their armor. Also, using the ADS cannons are completely fine, which worried me for the Leviathan Remnant fight, and that was really my only worry when it came to boss fights. Ammo would have been the biggest concern, but Dead Space actually rigs loot drops in your favor. Instead of giving you ammunition of all the weapons you've picked up, it only allows a weapon's ammo to drop if you have that weapon in your inventory. So, because the only weapon I'd ever have in my inventory is the plasma cutter, randomized loot drops would only give me ammo for it. So all my worries were basically alleviated before even starting the run, and because of that, I don't really have much to say about this run as a whole. Two nice things about this run is that I could dump all my power nodes into upgrading the suit and plasma cutter, and I wouldn't need to complete the You Are Not Authorized side quest to max out the plasma cutter, as all of its weapon upgrades are found without the Master Override keycard. With that, here's a montage of the plasma cutter only playthrough. And with that, the run is complete. I actually learned something super useful with the Hive Mind boss fight that would have helped me tremendously on other playthroughs. During the Hive Mind second phase, it always summons some exploders. Well, if you don't immediately explode them and instead cut off their explosive cluster, you can use Kinesis to toss that cluster into the Hive Mind's chest cavity during the third phase, which will explode several of the clusters that lie within, greatly reducing the time spent on that phase. Once Isaac escapes on the shuttle, I get the final achievement, 1 gun, for completing the game with only using the plasma cutter. And that was my journey to obtaining 100% of the achievements in the Dead Space Remake. I know some people like to use these videos as a bit of a guide, so for the first few months of this video's release, if you have any questions about the game that I didn't explain, feel free to ask in the comments.